Tomorrow night's a huge night for Newsmax, and yes, of course, for South Carolina. We are hosting the debate for the South Carolina Republican Senate runoff. I will be moderating the debate between Senator Darlene Graham and five-term Congressman Ralph Norman. The primary contest runoff is to fill the seat of the late Senator Lindsey Graham, and it's on Tuesday, August 25. A full preview is coming up. And do you remember this?
Hey, I'm over here. I want to call to Chairman Kim.
Yes, 7 years later, President Trump is touting his relationship with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un while sticking it to an ally. Why that is? Plus.
How hot do you think it is in there? Turn on the camera.
Famed actress Hayden Panettiere has died at the age of 36. The executive director of TMZ will join to discuss this shocking death. And 30 years later, with an autobiography that stings the defendant, the trial for the murder of TUPAC Shakur gets underway. What happened in court today? I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. Tomorrow, more state voters head to the polls. Alaska, Florida, and Wyoming, they're all going to hold their primaries. In Alaska, you might want to double-check your ballot. That's because there are two candidates with the same name running for Senate. There's incumbent two-term Senator Dan S. Sullivan and candidate Dan J. Sullivan. After a legal back-and-forth, challenger Dan J. Sullivan was allowed to remain on the ballot with incumbent Senator Dan S. Sullivan. Back in June, I spoke to Senator Sullivan about this.
Everybody has a right to be on the ballot, but you don't have a right to be on the ballot if your primary goal is to trick Alaskans and rig the vote in favor of another candidate.
And in the state of Florida, Democratic Socialists are looking to score a major upset. Senior correspondent John Huddy joins me. John?
Yeah, Greta, Florida's primary is being looked at as a real big test for the socialist candidates that are on the ballot. I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's start with Florida's governor's race. We're watching that very closely. So Congressman Byron Donalds, who has President Trump's endorsement, is still really leading in the latest polls over Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, a former Green Beret, along with former State House Speaker Paul Renner and James Fishback, a businessman. DeSantis, however, has not backed anyone as of yet, though singer Nicki Minaj endorsed Byron Donalds over the weekend, so there's that. On the Democratic side, David Jolly, the former Republican congressman, now running on the Democratic ticket, is leading the pack, looking to challenge the Republican pick in November. But Donalds has the biggest war chest, raising over $100 million at this point. We're also watching the U.S. Senate race to determine who completes the term previously held by Marco Rubio. So Governor DeSantis appointed then Florida AG Ashley Moody, who needs to win the election and remain in the seat through the end of Rubio's term. On the Democratic side, their socialist candidate, State Representative Angie Nixon of Jacksonville, and then retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, who you may recall gained national attention after testifying as a whistleblower during President Trump's first impeachment inquiry. There's also the newly configured 20th congressional district race, which comprises Broward County, where incumbent Democrat Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who had represented the 25th district, is trying to keep her seat in a district that has long elected black Democratic candidates. She's facing competition from 27-year-old socialist Elijah Manley and even Luther Campbell, a former member of the rap group Two Live Crew, if you remember that, going back a couple years. And in the newly redrawn 25th Congressional District, which is along Florida's southeast coast, incumbent Representative Jared Moskowitz, a moderate Democrat and staunch supporter of Israel, faces DSA-backed candidate Oliver Larkin, a socialist who, like the other DSA-backed candidates and socialists nationally and in Florida, supports free Medicare for all, free public university tuition, abolishing ICE, and then the common denominator, cutting ties with Israel. And Greta, along with these socialist candidates, Florida's primary also includes candidates described as white nationalists, including James Fishback, who has made headlines for not only views about race, but also alleged anti-Semitic remarks. Greta?
John Huddy, thank you. And it's time for the Soundbite Shuffle. Yes, sit back and I will scroll for you. Today, a congresswoman gets a new look, and House Minority Leader Democrat Hakeem Jeffries is asked if he supports the policies of the Democratic Socialists of America.
Honey, you need to hit the subscribe button right now.
Most of what we saw were crimes of poverty. People who were stealing things like toothpaste, people who were stealing things like, soap. And that means if you're stealing those things, you need them. That there are people who can be thrown in jail simply for having a biological need.
I really feel bad for what happened to Francesca, and I know it's fashionable to distance yourself. I'm not. I was proud to endorse her, and she's far more than the caricature that was presented.
Does it concern you that this type of celebration of Fidel Castro is what might validate people's concerns with the DSA?
I'm not concerned with how people construe this organization. I'm interested in finding what we have in common so that we can move this country forward based on bold policies.
Well, what I can say is that I do not support defunding the police. I do not support open borders. I do not support abolishing the Senate. Well, listen, I don't support the DSA agenda as has been articulated by the DSA itself.
CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp joins me. Matt, I want to start with tomorrow night's debate that Newsmax will be hosting. I'll be moderating. We have Senator Darlene Graham and we have Congressman Ralph Norman who will be debating each other. What's the strategy each must have?
Well, I think for Darlene Graham, obviously she's never done this before. And people on the, of Republican primaries dominated by conservative voters, and they want senators who are going to get in there and fight hard. Now, she's, the personification of Lindsey Graham's record. And for conservatives, it's a little mixed. For Ralph Norman, he has, for instance, in our scorecard, a perfect record. I mean, he's a conservative in every season on every topic. So it's going to be interesting. He's going to be the authentic conservative. She's going to go out there touting that she has President Trump's support. And we're going to see how that comes down.
Well, Ralph Norman, though, does he have a little bit of a problem? In the 2016, he endorsed then Governor Nikki Haley, or actually it was former Governor Nikki Haley, against Canada Donald Trump.
Yeah, I remember calling him at the time and saying, "Hey, Ralph, you've always loved Trump. What gives here?" And he's like, "I'm a South Carolinian, and was our governor. She's a daughter of South Carolina, and I feel like the voters will understand that it's more out of courtesy to stand with her." But I think it has resulted in President Trump perhaps taking this race a little personally. But I think people have to look at this race and say the following. Do you want more Ted Cruz's, Mike Lee's, Rick Scott's in the Senate? Or do you want more people who just kind of go along with the majority and aren't willing to say things like, hey, we should shut down the Senate until we pass the Save America Act? And so I think it's an interesting test to where the Republican Party is.
Senator Lindsey Graham was very interested in foreign affairs, foreign matters. He was always on a plane going someplace. I don't associate him, and this may be my lack of knowledge, but I don't associate him with state domestic issues. I imagine the voters are going to be wondering about state domestic issues, and I wonder, how does she align herself with Lindsey Graham and basically think of herself as being on a plane handling things around the world, or does she focus more on issues that many people in South Carolina have?
Yeah, so Greta, there's been this real fight, and we've seen it with a lot of social media influencers and people who have large followers with their podcasts, this whole idea of a neocon. And what a neocon is described as is a conservative who wants to use the military in an aggressive way overseas. Lindsey Graham was nothing if not a neocon. He wanted to fund the defense budgets, and he wanted to use our armed forces to push for freedom in human rights overseas, kind of no matter where it was. The latest example of this was really pushing President Trump to get involved in this conflict in Iran. I would say for most Trump supporters, most conservatives at this time, they're very, very leery after everything we did in the Middle East with President Bush. They would not consider themselves neocons. They're more realists. They're more Ronald Reagan, peace through strength. fund the military so that you don't have to use the military, and be very humble with the military, because we've been humiliated as a country over and over again, starting with Vietnam. And so, you know, a more cautious stance is where most conservatives are.
All right, Democratic Socialists, one in Michigan, one in New York City, lost in Wisconsin, and then you've got a whole menu of the Democratic Socialists running in the state of Florida, which is, you know, a stunning development.
Yeah, it is a stunning development. I mean, I remember saying years ago, we started a CPAC campaign, America versus Socialism, and people said, what are you talking about? I mean, America doesn't have socialists. And I said, no, America, you know, the Democratic Party is embracing socialism. And now you actually see Democrats saying that they're socialists. And then you say other Democrats saying they're not socialists, but they're going along with most of these radicalized policies. And I think this scares people, Greta, overseas, even people overseas who aren't, you know, conservative, but they really hate communism for what it did in their countries. I spent a lot of time in the former Eastern Bloc, and those countries are baffled as why America would think that Marxism or socialism would answer any of their problems. You know, I like the old Democratic Party that wanted to spend more than we wanted to spend and wanted a little less constitution, a little less guns, but they were still playing within the confines of our constitutional republic. And the current Democratic Party seems to want to chuck that and be more of a European socialist democracy. And so this is a real test for the voters. The Republican Party isn't perfect, but it's going to benefit, I believe, from the fact that the Democratic Party is embracing an ideology that is well outside the mainstream.
Well, I want to dig a little deeper. In the soundbite shuffle, we had the woman who wants, it appears she wants to legalize shoplifting. I'll leave that for another day because I want to dig a little deeper, see if she said a whole lot more. Anyway.
The grab and go.
We'll see what happens. Matt Schlapp, thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
Coming up, opening statements kick off in the TUPAC Shakur murder trial. And guess which famous rapper has already been name dropped? That when the record continues.
It's our America. We conquered it. We built it. Great values like honesty and fairness. Great courage. A great nation needs a free press. Newsmax is it. 30 million Americans regularly go to Newsmax when they really need to know. They watch Newsmax TV at home. On the free Newsmax app, they go to Newsmax.com. Start today. Newsmax is real news for real people.
I'm an advocate for student well-being. When it comes to understanding mental health, we've made great strides. But young people today are experiencing an unprecedented mental health and well-being challenge. The reasons are complex. Maybe it's academic pressure, or economic stress, or social isolation, or something else. As students, we're trying our best. So are our parents. But if we are going to improve youth mental health, we need a comprehensive approach that looks at all our sources of stress and is informed by us, the students. Get involved today at EmpowerOurFutureCoalition.com.
Dale, you really need to get that colon cancer screening. Yeah,
it's been forever.
Dale, you can do it with just a blood test. Shield.
Shield is for people 45 plus at average risk, not high risk for colon cancer. Ask your doctor about FDA-approved Shield.
While this banana may not save you from someone breaking into your home, Berna's banana helped one vet repel an intruder in his.
This huge guy, 6'5", 6'6", just barreled through my front door. I have my Berna and my Glock. I always go for the Berna first. I've seen enough death and destruction to last 2 lifetimes. Here is the perfect item I can have, feel totally safe, and know I'm not going to kill anybody.
At Berna, we don't sell bananas, we sell peace of mind.
What if losing a pair of sunglasses was actually fine? That's why we built Shady Rays. Every pair of Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection, but no matter what happens, whether you drop them in the lake, a wave gets them, they're covered with lost and broken protection.
She's back, not on Capitol Hill, but back in the news. Remember former Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema? Well, according to federal court pleadings on July 31st, under oath in a deposition, Sinema testified that while she was a U.S. senator, she repeatedly had sex with her then married security guard Matthew Amel. Amel's wife, Heather, is suing Sinema for allegedly breaking up her 14-year marriage. Heather Amel sued Sinema in a North Carolina court, and under North Carolina's alienation of affection law, a deserted spouse can successfully sue a third party for intentionally destroying a marriage. Sinema's team moved the case to federal court in North Carolina from North Carolina State Court, but state court law still applies, and then sought dismissal of the lawsuit. Sinema says her relationship with Matthew Amo occurred outside the state of North Carolina. In her deposition, Sinema also said she had multiple sexual encounters with Matthew Amo. Sexual encounters or sexual relationships began around Memorial Day 2024. The former U.S. Senator also testified that one of the sexual encounters occurred at a CNN anchor Jessica Dean's wedding in New York City. In Heather Amo's deposition, she read text messages she found on her husband's phone between Sinema and her husband. She also testified that Matthew was a, quote, established liar and manipulator. Heather and Matthew have 3 children. They separated on November 1, 2024, and finalized their divorce earlier this year in March. According to court documents, there will be an evidentiary hearing on Wednesday. Meanwhile, today, nearly 30 years after the fatal shooting of rapper TUPAC Shakur, opening statements kicked off today in the murder trial. Prosecutors claim the defendant, Dwayne Keith Davis, played a key role in the 1996 Las Vegas drive-by shooting killing of Shakur. Davis has pleaded not guilty, and today during opening statements, rapper Sean Diddy Combs, who is currently incarcerated for other crimes, was name-dropped.
One of the connections that Dwayne Davis gets through his association with Zip Martin is with Sean Puffy Combs, who was then the CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment. Sean Combs wanted some security when he came out to the West Coast. He was worried about Mob Piru. He was worried about the members of Death Row Records. And so Dwayne EPD Davis agreed to be around to act as unofficial security for Sean Combs and his artists when they came out west.
Criminal defense attorney Mark Geragos joins me. Nice to see you again, Mark. And the problem that got this case brought is that the defendant wrote a book in which he says a lot of things that are incriminating, including that he was there and explained why the shooting occurred. And now his lawyer is apparently saying that the elements that his client wrote in the book were fictionized or exaggerated by the co-author. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are, Greta, you're old enough to remember when you counseled not one but multiple clients to STF you, because it's amazing to me this case would have been nowhere but for that book. And in fact, the book was cited today in the openings, and I don't know. It's a constant perplexing situation to me why people think that it's a good thing. Murder has no statute of limitations, and this is the perfect example. In fact, I may use this as a kind of primer for clients about talking and resisting the urge to talk.
What kind of jury would you have wanted to pick in this case if you were the defense lawyer?
You know, I thought about that. It's a great question. I think I would probably want people who are not too familiar with the kind of hip-hop lifestyle for a variety of reasons. I think that the rumors that have been circulating for decades around this, and I know it because of they always have falsely accused Sean about having some involvement. I don't think I would want people who would be going down that conspiracy rabbit hole. I think people who may not have a whole lot of knowledge about this or even about TUPAC would probably be the best jurors in this case.
You know, oftentimes juries, you know, you get jurors who have the time to serve, which means retired people, which generally means older people. And I would actually want someone a little bit younger than someone old who's looking at this story, thinking to myself, they're running around shooting each other in cars after a fight in a lobby. And I would like, for some reason, and it's voodoo. Picking a jury is voodoo, which is people don't understand. But I wouldn't want 12 retired people.
No, I don't think I would either. But I also would not want people steeped in hip hop culture because they would probably drive the jury. As you know, one of the greatest things about jury selection isn't you're never going to get 12 people that you want. What you're trying to get is somebody who's going to drive your story or narrate your story, and a wingman or a wing woman. I always look for two people who are going to kind of control the deck, so to speak, because you're never going to get 12 that are going to be all with you.
Sometimes you're trying to case a defense lawyer when you look at those 12 jurors, you look at the evidence, you look at that book on the prosecutor's table where your client has pretty much admitted a lot of the stuff, and you think you just want one juror to hang it so that it's forced into a retrial. And usually on a retrial, you get a really good plea offer because the prosecutor doesn't want to retry it or witnesses vanish.
That's exactly right. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've hung juries 11-1 for guilt. And it's nerve-wracking as you're out there on day 3, day 4, sometimes day 7 of deliberations. And it takes a certain kind of juror who can withstand that pressure, because you've normally got those jury deliberation rooms, which are closed quarters to begin with. And if you've got 11 people who are getting heated over their opinion, it takes quite the wherewithal to stand up to that.
Men or women, although, I mean, you like a mix because you know who's going to hang the jury, but men or women, what do you want on the jury?
You know, I don't think I could do it gender-wise unless I look them in the eyes. You could always get, I think, a man that makes more sense or a woman that makes more sense once you look them in the eye. You know, years ago, California did away with voir dire in criminal cases. And that lasted about 3 months before the DA's office ran up to the Sacramento to get that changed, because there was a upsurge in hung juries because they didn't get to voir dire and figure out who was kind of off-center or anti-authoritarian. So I always say you don't know until you look them in the eyes and you let them talk. Then once they talk, you get a pretty good idea of who they are.
And to be honest, when I've tried cases, I think most lawyers exist as you're sitting looking at the panel and trying to decide which one to pick. You turn to your co-defendant and say, that one doesn't look very good to me. He looks like he thinks my client's guilty. It is voodoo, largely this, and everyone thinks it's pretty much a science, but whatever. Anyway,
well,
Mark.
Thank you, Greta. It is kind of divining jackal tracks in a certain sense. So,
I once had a case where the prosecutor didn't want anyone with aviator glasses, and he came back after lunch wearing aviator glasses. Turned out to be the foreman, and the prosecutor lost the case. But anyway, Mark Geragos, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greta. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. What happened to Midwest Nice? Things got pretty heated in my home state of Wisconsin. Multiple fights broke out at the Wisconsin State Fair. What you're watching on your screen is one of the fights. You can see a bunch of teenagers in a brawl at the State Fair. And according to WISN 12 news station, at least one police officer was punched in the face during the brawl. Officials have not released any information as to the cause for the multiple fights that broke out at the State Fair. Coming up, new dispatch audio reveals possible cause of death of a 36-year-old actress. That when the record continues.
A new president is sworn in. America's greatness is restored. Millions of Americans are tuning in to Newsmax. Even President Trump says Newsmax is terrific. Watch Newsmax or download our free app on your TV or phone today.
What if I told you you can get a brand new metal roof from Erie Home for 50% off the installation? Now you can. Our metal roofs are proven to withstand 120 miles per hour wind and 2-inch hail, all backed by a 50-year warranty. Call now for your free estimate.
What if your GLP-1 for weight loss was as easy to take as a mint? Small, discreet, and easy. Think about that. No needles. This is compounded tirzepatide, a mint-flavored tablet designed to fit into your daily routine. You simply let it dissolve under your tongue. A simple daily tablet, as easy to take as a mint.
Save $50 with promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim.
For pain in multiple spots like here, here, or here, Salonpas patches stick firmly and remove comfortably once your pain is gone. Salonpas. It's good medicine.
If you have wet AMD or DME, you never want to lose sight of the things you love. And your condition doesn't have to steal the moment. Long-lasting EYLEA HD delivers powerful vision improvements that can save your vision for the future. EYLEA HD is the first and only treatment for wet AMD and DME that gives you a chance for 5 months between injections after 1 year of successful response. Don't take EYLEA HD if you have an eye infection, eye pain, redness, or are allergic to it. Eye injections like EYLEA HD may cause eye infection, separation of the retina, rare but severe swelling of blood vessels in the eye, or increased eye pressure. There is an uncommon risk of heart attack or stroke. There's still so much to see. Ask about next generation EYLEA HD, a treatment retina specialists trust.
Several days ago, my plane crashed in the wild.
Good job, buddy.
I'll get you home.
The night is come, and all the land is dark.
I got you. Go on, boy.
Heart of the Beast. New trailer online now.
When Saturday rolls around, I don't want to jump through hoops to watch college football. Good thing DirecTV makes it easy to keep up with my favorite college teams. No hopping between apps or channels.
Stream college football without the hurdles on DirecTV.
I'm Elmer Heinrich, at 92 years of age with my wife Shirley, who is 83. Now, both of us are still cutting a wide swath in life, all because of Immuno 150. Now, we are asking you to use Immuno 150 like we do. Give it a chance for at least 90 days so that you can see what 70 plant minerals and 80 additional nutrients can do for you.
It really is incredible.
Don't place your order until after you've watched the 3 videos on our website.
Actress Hayden Panettiere died yesterday at the age of 36. The actress, known for her roles in Heroes, Remember the Titans, and Nashville, was found unresponsive inside a South Carolina apartment complex. According to Greenville police, emergency medical personnel performed life-saving measures on Panettiere after receiving a call about an unresponsive person. Here's dispatch audio obtained by TMZ. It is responders sending medics to Panettiere's location.
Mr. 1, Medic 29 responding.
Respond in place of Medic 29. Overdose, CPR is in progress.
She died 7 days before her 37th birthday. TMZ executive producer Charles Latibeaudiere joins me. Nice to see you, Charles.
Hey, good to see you too, Greta.
So, Charles, tell me about this woman. And I mean, was she on a path of personal destruction, or is this? I mean, we don't know what happened yet, but.
Yeah, we don't know. The coroner came out and said that their autopsy has been completed. They were not able to confirm a cause of death, but they did say that there was no signs of trauma that makes them think there was foul play here. As to whether or not this had anything to do with Hayden's longtime battles with addiction, something that she had, said in interviews earlier this year that she felt she had finally turned a page on. There are a couple of interesting things we found out about what happened in this apartment in Greenville, South Carolina. You heard that dispatch audio, and you heard the medic saying that there's possible overdose, that they had started CPR. But we have confirmed through photos and witnesses there that there were 2 ambulances sent to that apartment, which usually means that there are 2 people in distress. We also know that the stretchers that went in from those ambulances came out empty. The coroner did eventually show up and remove Hayden's body, but nobody got in those ambulances. Nobody was transported to a hospital, which makes you think that if there was a second person in distress, there was some sort of treatment that they got that made them okay. Next clue is that we found out that there is Narcan, that there was Narcan found in the apartment, and that Narcan was found on a roll-out or pull-out bed in the apartment. Now, if someone was administered or attempted to administer Narcan, that is something that you take to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. So we don't know if that was given to Hayden or if it was given to someone else who was in the apartment, but it's certainly, the evidence is certainly pointing to that there could have been a second person in the apartment. Now, we don't know who that person is. We do know that the reason she was even in Greenville, South Carolina, her longtime boyfriend, and they were really on again, off again for years, Brian Hickerson, is from that area. So, and we know that Brian had traveled to South Carolina with Hayden in the days before her death.
She has a child and a fiance who I think lives overseas.
Yeah, lives in Ukraine. The father of her daughter is the boxer, former boxer Vladimir Klitschko, and he's from Ukraine. And there was a very nasty custody battle many, many years ago, and essentially Hayden gave up in that battle, and she wrote in her book that she felt it was the best path for her daughter Kaya to be with her father, because there were just so many demons that that Hayden was battling, not the least of which being really severe postpartum depression, and she writes about that in her book also. So the relationship with her daughter, while she didn't have custody, she did say that she felt like it was getting better, and that that they were headed in the right direction as far as repairing that relationship. The daughter is now 11, and sadly, we won't get to see how that part of Hayden's relationship with Kaya plays out.
And I should add that it was the ex-fiance, not a current fiance. And oddly enough, he's from Ukraine, and I interviewed his brother years ago, who happens to be the mayor of
right?
Kyiv. So, mayor of Kyiv, yeah. Charles, as always, thank you. TMZ is always on top of these stories first. Thank you very much, Charles.
You got it. Thanks, Greta.
And it's time for our outrage of the day. You won't believe this one. It is outrageous. A Louisiana man allegedly killed his wife, placed her in the passenger seat of his car, and then drove through multiple states with her dead body. It took one traffic violation in Memphis, Tennessee, for 50-year-old Tyrone Brazil to be discovered and booked. According to investigators, Brazil and his wife, Lanessa Bradford, got into an argument at a park in Baton Rouge. That is when Brazil allegedly shot Bradford. According to a friend, Bradford was planning to leave Brazil, but was unable to do so before being shot. It's not clear what Brazil's plan was following his alleged shooting of his wife. Brazil is expected to be extradited to Louisiana, where he will likely face a murder charge. Coming up, thousands of people get pummeled with severe weather. We take a look at what could come next. Does it include you? That when the record continues.
Kibble. It's been the standard for decades, and it's failing our dogs. That's why we created Badlands Ranch Superfood Complete. It's gently air-dried, locking in the nutrients and the flavor dogs go wild for. Visit your local pet food retailer today.
LeafGuard has earned the Good Housekeeping seal for over 20 years and has been lab tested to handle up to 32 inches of rainfall an hour. Don't deal with those old gutters any longer. Get LeafGuard, the only seamless one-piece rainwater management system with a clog-free guarantee and lifetime transferable warranty. It's LeafGuard's Celebrate America sale. 75% off installation of a complete LeafGuard system. You'll receive a bonus, a $250 Visa gift card with your LeafGuard purchase. Act now and get no interest and no payments until 2028. Remember, with LeafGuard, the top's not a cover, it's part of the gutter. Call now to have a nice gift for you. A free $100 Visa gift card with your free in-home estimate. Call 800-541-1274. Now let me give you that number again. 1-800-541-1274.
The LeafGuard system has blown away our initial expectations.
I love the fact my LeafGuard gutters are low maintenance.
I'm a happy LeafGuard customer.
Who wants to be on a ladder this summer cleaning clogged gutters? I mean, let's face it, they can be a fire hazard in drier conditions. All it takes is one spark. That's why homeowners choose LeafGuard, the gutter that never clogs guaranteed. It's our Celebrate America sale, 75% off installation of a complete Leaf Guard system. You'll receive a bonus, a $250 Visa gift card with purchase. Act now and get no interest and no payments until 2028. This will come in handy when you fill up at the pump, a free $100 Visa gift card with your free in-home estimate. Call 800-541-1274. Now, let me give you that number again. 1-800-541-1274.
Did you hear about Shield, that test for colon cancer?
No, what?
It's just a blood test.
No.
Exactly.
Shield is for people 45 plus at average risk, not high risk for colon cancer. Ask your doctor about FDA-approved Shield.
Every 8 minutes, a claim of sexual assault is filed against rideshare drivers.
But rideshare companies prohibit both drivers and riders from carrying firearms to protect themselves.
Imagine this banana was a less lethal device capable of incapacitating an attacker in a fraction of a second and allowing you to escape.
At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to find out how you can always be prepared to defend.
For the love of your life, have your engagement ring custom made by the Jewelry Exchange. 1-carat certified lab diamonds, $4.99, or natural GIA for $15.90. 14K mounts are $4.99. Thousands of choices, always the best deal. The Jewelry Exchange Direct.
We have an agreement. Earlier today, President Trump's son-in-law and special envoy Jared Kushner met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Why? To agree that a United States general should oversee the demilitarization of Hamas. This information according to an Israeli official. Meanwhile, the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran has officially expired. The 60-day ceasefire ended with no deal between the United States and Iran. Here is President Trump.
They want to make a deal, but they're not going to make the kind of a deal that I feel is necessary. Look, we're in there for one reason. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. You understand that? Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't have a nuclear weapon. The country's a mess, and the military is totally defeated.
And today, Ibrahim Azizi, a member of Iran's parliament, posted this ominous warning. He wrote on X, quote, "The President of the United States, instead of his endless bluffs regarding the Strait of Hormuz, should be thinking about securing his own safety so that he does not have to resort to fleeing to a food truck," end quote. Azizi is obviously referring to the president's July departure from the NATO summit in Turkey. The U.S. was told that Iran had threatened the president, and as a safety measure, the president entered Air Force One and then sneaked from the 747 to a food catering truck parked against the plane. He was then secretly taken to another plane to head home to the United States. Meanwhile, back at home, Hawaii got slammed by tropical storm Lala and is now cleaning up. The damage is widespread across Hawaii's Big Island. Currently, more than 100,000 homes are without power. And then today, the Midwest, it is also cleaning up. Severe rainfall led to catastrophic floods. Indiana experienced the worst. Meteorologist Julia Fife joins me. Julia?
Hey, Greta, and Indiana actually dealing with those power outages as well. We still have 100,000 or more customers without that power currently due to the excessive amount of rainfall they've received since last Monday. And here's a look at some of those top rainfall totals across the states of Indiana. Areas got over a foot worth of rain. That includes Illinois and Ohio as well. It all started last week with that derecho event, which is that big windstorm that happened that left widespread damage, and they really just couldn't catch a break as we headed into the weekend. They're getting a little bit of relief today. That starts to subside just a little bit. You can see that excessive rainfall over the Ohio Valley today, but as we head into tomorrow, that risk comes back into the Midwest for some more flooding. That level 2 out of 4 threat. That's going to stick with them through Wednesday as well, as we've got several cold fronts that are going to be tracking through the eastern portion of the U.S. And we also have some severe threat. Again, with those 2 cold fronts that are going to be tracking through, we've got that severe threat over the northern plains today. Level 2 out of 5 risk. Damaging wind gusts will be that primary concern. But before that daytime heating kicks in, that's when you have those isolated supercells. So we could see some tornadoes develop across that region. That second cold front moving through the mid-Atlantic. Once again, level 2 out of 5 risk with gusty winds and flooding being that primary concern. Live look at our radar right now. We're already starting to see things light up. We've got a flood watch in place over portions of the Ohio Valley. Severe thunderstorm watch in place for eastern Tennessee and the Carolinas as well. You can see those orange polygons already. Those are severe thunderstorm warnings. I mean, we're seeing winds over 70 miles per hour throughout that area. And there's those isolated storms across the northern plains. It's all being fueled by the heat. We've got those heat alerts in place down south. Excessive heat warnings all the way from the mid-south down into Louisiana. They're tapping into that Gulf moisture. That means feels like temperatures are expected to get above 110 degrees. Very dangerous heat right now through that area. Greta.
Julia Fife, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up tomorrow's a big night in South Carolina, and for Newsmax, I'll be moderating a debate between the two Senate candidates, Senator Darlene Graham and Congressman Ralph Norman. Why is this debate and race so important to you? That when the record continues.
You can't find a ranch style with a view.
And a mom-in-law suite.
More realtor agents recommend Realtor.com. With their expert new search tool, just search it like you'd say it.
Room for mom.
And Reba. Make it real with Realtor.com.
It's 2 a.m. Your fever spiked and you're miserable. Here's your options.
Urgent care, closed. ER, slammed. And you'll spend hundreds of thousands in both. Telehealth, yeah, but the pharmacies are closed.
That's the reason why we keep emergency medical kits at home.
It has doctor-prescribed medication like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other antibiotics and antivirals. You can treat flu, pneumonia, strep, sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
Because if you're sick in at night, traveling or stranded, you don't want options.
You want what is inside this kit. No waiting, no pharmacy, and no copays.
Just schedule a quick telehealth call.
And that's how you feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
Every family should have this kit, and here's how to order yours.
Order online in minutes and use the promo code to save $45. Your doctor-prescribed kit ships fast to your door, packed with medications to treat over 30 conditions. So when something hits, you're ready. And a wellness company telehealth doctor is always there if you need guidance.
Your mouthwash routine just got a whole lot smarter. Use SmartMouth Activated Dry Mouth for immediate relief and 12-hour bad breath prevention guaranteed. If your mouthwash isn't activated, it's not SmartMouth. Relieve your dry mouth and prevent bad breath. Get Activated SmartMouth.
Case after case, unsolved.
They don't care about us. I kill them all.
Let these crackers know their consequences.
Crackers.
But you never heard of that?
No.
Saltine cracker, no flavor, white man.
And square. Now this is getting good. What are you? Chocolate, delicious, like a Tootsie Roll, right?
By any means. Only in theaters September 4th.
Every day, bumps and bangs happen. Bruises are optional. Use daily dermatologist recommended Dermend and reduce the appearance of bruises. Get Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream in the first aid aisle.
I'm putting with Abe Lincoln's cane right now.
These are 40-something years old.
Yeah. There we go. Oh, come on!
I really believe that God put us on a course to take care of all these catastrophic needs of service members, Gold Star widows.
It's because of all of them that we get to do what we do.
Let's do good together.
Let's do it. People got to give every time I miss.
You got to give $11.
There we go. You're the man. Donate $11 a month at T2T.org.
Jordan's a new homeowner, and she thought she had a drainage problem.
There's water everywhere.
Turns out it was clogged gutters. It pools near your foundation and can seep into your home. But Leaf Filter keeps your gutters clog-free. Call or click today.
A win for North Korea's President Kim Jong-un. President Trump has ordered the Pentagon to scale back our joint military exercises with South Korea. Military exercises were planned for this week, so why is Trump scaling back? In a Truth Social post, Trump writes, quote, "Based on my very good relationship with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, I'm not happy with the fact that the United States has long ago agreed to participate in joint military exercises with South Korea, end quote. Trump has also said the exercises, quote, send a signal that is totally inappropriate and hostile. Earlier, President Trump spoke about his decision.
Why hasn't Kim Jong-un responded to your request to have a conversation?
How do you know he hasn't responded?
Has he?
Yeah, he has. And very positive. President of South Korea, who I like, I think he's very nice, actually. But I called him, I said, would you like to give us a little hand? We don't need help with Iran, but if you'd like, give us a hand with Iran. He said, no thanks. And I said, wait a minute, we have 39,000 soldiers over there guarding you from Kim Jong-un, your next door neighbor, and you're not going to help us on a very easy military operation in Iran? That's strange. No, we'd rather not get involved. I say, well, why are we involved in helping you?
President Trump is the only sitting U.S. president to meet with a North Korean leader, and he has met with Kim Jong-un 3 times, once in Singapore in 2018, then in Vietnam in 2019, and the 3rd time was in June 2019. That's when President Trump stepped across the border into North Korean territory. Now to South Carolina. Tomorrow night, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, I will moderate a debate for the Republican primary runoff for U.S. Senate. Senator Darlene Graham Nordone will face 5-term Congressman Ralph Norman. Correspondent Andrew Kraft joins me from Newberry, South Carolina. Andrew?
Yeah, Greta, and we're right outside the beautiful, historic Newberry Opera House, where, of course, the debate will take place tomorrow night. We're 8 days away from the Senate GOP primary runoff, and we just have to spare a thought for South Carolina primary voters, especially GOP primary voters, because before the summer will be over, they will have been asked to vote 4 separate times. They're in the primary June 9th, the runoff June 23rd, the special Senate primary back on August 11th, and, of course, the runoff on the 25th, a week from tomorrow here. Let's talk about the candidates, though. You may be, though, if you're a voter, experiencing some of this voter fatigue. Darlene Graham, though, thrust into this role after her brother's sudden passing, gaining the backing of President Trump quite quickly, and then ultimately, yes, deciding to run for the full 6-year term. She's been facing questions about whether or not she has what it takes, whether or not she has the experience, but a lot of these issues that matter to voters, they include, of course, the cost of living, affordability, but also the war in Iran. Of course, the late Lindsey Graham was a major proponent of the president's efforts to deprive Iran of a nuclear weapon. Today marks 60 days since the memorandum of understanding was signed. The president in the Oval Office saying he will not be seeking an extension of that MOU. Of course, the Graham sanctions bill against Russia, and now newly Iran waiting to move in the House. Another issue, of course, AI data centers. They have dominated this midterm cycle as one of these major issues. So I want to talk, though, about Ralph Norman. He's been in the House for quite some time, though an interesting split playing out here in the Palmetto State among some of these really big GOP names, Greta. Norman garnering the endorsement of former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Now, remember, Norman endorsed Haley in the 2024 presidential primaries over then former President Trump here. Now, Norman has been running for several different races over the course of the last year and a half. Remember, just in June, he came in 3rd in the GOP governor's contest here, now trying his hand with his opportunity in the wake of Lindsey Graham's passing at Senate politics here. So we'll just have to wait and see what they say, what you ask tomorrow during this forum. And I just have to note that it does seem like a battle is brewing between who is the more conservative choice. Is it Darlene Graham? Is it Ralph Norman? Of course, Norman, a key member of the House Freedom Caucus as well. And local reporting, Greta, does suggest, depending on how this runoff goes on Tuesday, President Trump will come to rally in the state. Now, where and when he does that remains to be seen. Reporting live here in Newberry, South Carolina, Andrew Kraft, Newsmax.
Andrew Kraft, thank you very much. Pollster McLaughlin and Associates and pollster for Trump's 2016 campaign, John McLaughlin, joins me. Nice to see you, sir. And after our very long discussion about 2 weeks ago on my podcast, I'm now highly suspicious of methodology by different people doing these polls and the influence they have on voters. So tell me, what do you think about the current polls in South Carolina?
Well, by the way, having had the experience of in 2024 being able to call Donald Trump, the day he was going to South Carolina. He was in Washington at CPAC, and he was going there. I had to call him about something else, and he says, so what are we going to win by tonight? And I said, 20 points. And he said, that's all? And I said, it's Nikki Haley's home state. You're going to win by 20 points. Declare victory, and let's go and sweep Super Tuesday. And so I have a bit of experience being accurate in South Carolina. And I know Ralph, and I don't know Darlene, but I knew her brother, Senator Graham. And this many primaries, you won't have the turnout that kind of Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley had in the state, where Donald Trump won decisively in our home state. But last time you had over 300,000 people vote in the initial round. And Ralph Norman did well in his district, because you need a geographic base, an ideological base, and a demographic base to win. So he won in his district. But Russell Fry won in his district, and Darlene pretty much won in the rest of the state, though Mark Sanford came close in Charleston, the area he used to represent. Now it's tough because, Donald Trump's endorsement has been near perfect this year. And certainly when we polled earlier, Alan Wilson, when we had him winning over Evett, Trump co-endorsed. He saw that poll, and he co-endorsed Alan Wilson, who's now the, candidate for governor. So you'll have a lower turnout, but the question is, where are they coming from? The debate is critical. I know you'll be fair. You'll have a great debate. You'll ask important questions, and a lot of people will be watching that who are thinking of voting, who have not yet voted, and that'll be a critical moment, because they knew Lindsey, and they have a pretty good idea who Ralph Norman is, and they're both conservatives, but Donald Trump has endorsed her, and if she has a good debate. So do you think that'll be the? I mean, this is all sort of interesting, but I mean, the endorsement by Trump of her. I think she's got a hard race ahead of her, just because she's sort of new, even though she has the last name. But you think that Trump can pull her over the finish line? Well, I think she's got to perform in the debate, and she's so far, when she's been approached by the media and she's had the spotlight on her, she's done well. Ralph Norman is definitely tested. He's certainly debated before. He's been in office. He's a principal conservative in the Freedom Caucus. So I think the question will be is the voters. She got over 100,000 votes last time. Ralph got about 82,000. For those voters, if she passes the test, Donald Trump's endorsement will be a seal of approval and imprimatur of the conservative movement, of the Trump voters.
Well, I'm a bit apprehensive, just because I want to be fair to both of them. So we'll see. I want to do my best. Anyway, John McLaughlin, thank you very much.
You'll do great. That's what the polls are saying.
Thank you. Now I'm really nervous when you say stuff like that to me. Anyway, thank you. Okay, how does this even happen? A new report says a White House imposter was communicating with the leader of the United Kingdom. The report from Politico cites anonymous sources. You know how I feel about anonymous sources. I hate them. But this Politico report says the Prime Minister of the UK, Andy Burnham, exchanged messages with someone posing as White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. It's unclear what they discussed or when the conversations happened. But the Prime Minister reportedly briefly chatted with the imposter before he started getting suspicious. 10 Downing Street told Politico about this report, quote, "We do not comment on national security matters," end quote. In May, the Wall Street Journal reported that the FBI was investigating after Susie Wiles' cell phone contacts were hacked. The Journal said a Wiles imposter sent calls and texts to Republican lawmakers and business executives. Coming up, there's a job opening. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley is looking to fill a very important role. What is it? You need experience. That when the record continues.
Think you need a new roof? Think again. Most roofing companies only make money one way, by selling you a new roof. But what if your roof isn't worn out, just dried out? And with just a little love, you could put off an expensive roof replacement for up to 15 years, at a fraction of the cost of a new roof. Roofmax is a scientifically engineered restoration formula that brings your shingle life back to new. Scan the code and get a free roof tune-up with your Roofmax restoration.
Flags of Fellowship began as a visible act of remembrance and solidarity.
This is a conversation about how a symbol can become a bridge.
I cannot, as a Christian pastor, with the Holy Spirit living inside of me, watch what happened on October 7th and be silent.
Their struggle, their plight has landed on good ground in the hearts of Christians. And they're acting it out visibly.
Pastor Carlos, you are one of the visionaries behind Flags of Fellowship, planting Israeli flags to remember the 1,200 lives that were lost.
That's the whole thing, is to take action. We've been putting flags for the past 2 years in all 50 states.
A physical manifestation allows tangible to become spiritual and reach the divine.
This is a very American thing to do, and I'm proud to plant this flag.
Join over 2,500 congregations participating this year. Visit ifcj.org/FOF.
What if your GLP-1 for weight loss was as easy to take as a mint? Small, discreet, and easy. Think about that, no needles. This is compounded tirzepatide, a mint-flavored tablet designed to fit into your daily routine. You simply let it dissolve under your tongue. A simple daily tablet, as easy to take as a mint.
Save $50 with promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim. That's promo code SLIM at dropthepounds.com/slim.
There's a reason the wealthy don't keep all their money in one place. We work hard our entire lives to build wealth for retirement. If your retirement dropped 30% tomorrow, would you be ready? Or would you just have to wait and hope it comes back? The last thing any of us wants is to watch our retirement accounts shrink every time Wall Street panics, the dollar drops, or global uncertainty rises. That's why so many successful Americans turn to gold to help protect their retirement. And Preserve Gold is the only precious metals company I trust and recommend. Let me be frank, gold is not for everybody. And I do not give financial advice, but I do urge you to get my free wealth protection guide from Preserve Gold and learn about a special offer to receive up to $20,000 in free gold and silver. Education is power.
Text Newsmax to 50505.
Almost half of women runners say safety is their biggest concern.
Majority of us have to constantly change routes, start times.
Instead of thinking of my pace, we worry about being followed, unwanted attention, and stuff that is simply scary.
Imagine this banana was a less lethal device, capable of incapacitating an attacker, letting you get to safety. At Byrna, we don't sell bananas. Go to Byrna.com to find how you can always safely make it to the finish line.
We have an update to a story we brought you last week. As we reported, Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley bid farewell to his trusty vacuum. He had named her Beth. Beth, the vacuum, was almost 50 years old, so he found a replacement. How's it going? Senator Grassley posted an update.
With the demise of Beth, I thought I'd be able to use my 1966 Electrolux. But it doesn't work either. So I'm going to have to wait until somebody gives me a used Hoover.
Senator Grassley is still searching for the perfect replacement for Beth, but he wants it to be a Hoover vacuum like Beth. We're going to see if he finds one. As a reminder, I have a podcast called Greta Wire. You'll like it. It's different. You can subscribe right now on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or newsmax.com/listen. Thank you for watching. Ed Henry, The Big Take is next. David, Newsmax.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.